The Great Wall of China is one of the longest structures ever built by human hands. It stretches across mountains, deserts, and plains for thousands and thousands of miles. Most people have heard of it. Very few people know exactly who built it, or why, or how long it really took. Tonight, we are going to find out together, very slowly. Before there was a wall, there was just land. Wide open land stretching from the Yellow River Plains northward into vast grasslands. These grasslands had no fences, no borders, no signs. Just grass, wind, and the occasional hawk circling very slowly above it all. It was, by most accounts, very quiet. The people who lived on those northern plains were called nomads. They did not build cities or plant crops. They moved with their animals, horses, sheep, goats, across the land following the seasons. They slept in round felt tents called yurts. They were very good at riding horses. This is important to remember. South of the grasslands, a different kind of people were building a different kind of life. They planted millet and wheat. They dug irrigation channels. They built villages from rammed earth and timber. These were the early Chinese farmers, and they liked staying in one place very much. They found the nomads somewhat alarming. For centuries, farmers and nomads lived side by side in an uneasy sort of way. Sometimes they traded. The farmers gave grain and silk. The nomads gave horses and furs. It was not always unfriendly, but it was also not always peaceful. Sometimes the nomads raided the villages, and the farmers had no horses fast enough to stop them. The earliest Chinese states began to appear around 3,000 years ago. They were small kingdoms, each ruled by a lord or a king. These kingdoms were often at war with each other, which kept everyone very busy and very tired. Walls, at this point, were mostly built around cities to keep out rival kings, not nomads. The Zhou dynasty was one of the longest-lasting dynasties in all of Chinese history. It lasted from around 1046 BCE to 256 BCE. That is nearly 800 years. During that time, the central government slowly weakened, and the lords of various regions began acting more and more like independent kings. This period became known as the Warring States period. During the Warring States period, the various kingdoms started building walls. Not one big wall, many small walls. Each kingdom built walls along its borders to slow down enemies. The state of Qi built a wall. The state of Wei built a wall. The state of Zhao built a wall. Everyone was building walls. It was a very wall-focused time in history. These early walls were not made of stone. They were made of rammed earth, a technique where workers would pack layers of soil very tightly together inside wooden frames. It was slow, heavy work. The walls were not beautiful, but they were surprisingly strong. Some sections of these early walls still exist today, mostly as low brown mounds in the ground. The state of Qin was located in the west, in a region that is now the province of Shanxi. For a long time, the other kingdoms looked down on Qin as backward and semi-barbaric. Qin was on the frontier, close to the nomads. But over time, Qin grew very powerful, very organized, and very determined. The other kingdoms would soon regret underestimating them. The Qin kingdom had a minister named Shang Yang who completely reorganized the state. He introduced strict laws, rewarded farmers and soldiers, and removed power from the old aristocracy. Everyone had a job. Everyone had a rank. The state became like a very efficient, very serious machine. Fun was not especially encouraged. By around 250 BCE, the state of Qin had become the most powerful kingdom in China. Its armies were large, well-equipped, and disciplined. Its agriculture was productive. Its administration was methodical. The other kingdoms watched nervously. One by one, they would fall. It was only a matter of time, and the Qin were very patient about time. In 221 BCE, the king of Qin conquered the last of the rival kingdoms. For the first time in history, all of China, or what was then considered China, was unified under a single ruler. The king gave himself a new title, Qin Shi Huang, which roughly translates to First Emperor of Qin. He was 38 years old and very pleased with himself. Qin Shi Huang immediately began making changes. He standardized the writing system so everyone in China used the same characters. He standardized weights and measures. He standardized axle widths for carts so they could all use the same road ruts. He was, by any measure, a man who liked things to be standardized. He also began thinking about the northern frontier. The northern frontier was a serious concern. The nomadic people of the steppes, now increasingly called the Xiongnu, had become more organized and more threatening. They were raiding border settlements with growing frequency. The emperor needed a solution. He would, in time, choose the largest and most ambitious solution anyone had ever proposed. Before the Great Wall project began, Qin Shi Huang sent his best general northward. General Ming led an army of 300,000 soldiers across the Yellow River and pushed the Xiongnu back into the deeper steppe. It was a successful campaign. The border was secure for now, but everyone knew the Xiongnu would return. They always returned. With the military campaign complete, Qin Shi Huang gave General Meng Tian a new assignment: build a wall, not a small wall around a city, a wall along the entire northern frontier of the empire, a wall so long and so strong that no nomad could cross it without being seen, slowed down, or stopped entirely. It was an enormous idea. General Meng Tian began the project around 220 BCE. He would work on it for roughly a decade. The work involved connecting and extending many of the older walls that already existed along the northern borders of the former kingdoms. It was less like building from scratch and more like stitching together a patchwork quilt. A very large, very heavy, very dangerous quilt. The workers who built the Qin Wall were not volunteers. They were conscripted, meaning they were ordered to come and work whether they wanted to or not. Soldiers were assigned to the project. Peasant farmers were called up. Convicted criminals were sent north to work. It was hot in summer, bitterly cold in winter, and always exhausting. The conditions were brutal. Workers labored far from home, often for years at a time. Food was scarce. Disease was common. Many workers died on the project and were buried, according to legend, within the wall itself. Later generations would call the Great Wall the longest cemetery on earth. Whether bodies are actually inside the wall is debated by archaeologists. But the deaths were real. The Qin Wall followed the natural landscape wherever possible. It climbed over mountains, ran along ridgelines, and dipped into valleys. Building on flat ground was easier, but building on steep mountain slopes was extraordinarily difficult. Stones, earth, and timber had to be carried up by hand. There were no cranes, no trucks, no machines, just people, baskets, and rope. In the desert sections of the western frontier, there was very little stone available. Workers there used whatever the land provided: compressed layers of sand, gravel, reeds, and tamarisk branches pressed together in alternating layers. These desert walls looked quite different from the mountain walls, but they worked well enough. The desert sections lasted surprisingly long in the dry air. The wall was not just a barrier, it was also a road. The top of the wall was wide enough in many sections for soldiers to march along it. Watchtowers were placed at regular intervals so that guards could see long distances in both directions. Beacon towers were built to send smoke signals. One fire for a small raid, more fires for a larger one. It was an early warning system. A beacon fire could relay a message from the frontier all the way to the capital in a matter of hours. Soldiers at each tower would watch for signals, then light their own fire to pass the message along. It was like a very slow telegraph, made of smoke. In the still desert air, the smoke columns could be seen for miles and miles and miles. Life for a soldier stationed on the wall was monotonous. They watched the northern horizon. They repaired crumbling sections. They stored grain and weapons. They sent messages. They waited. Most of the time, nothing happened. The wall did its job simply by being there, a reminder to anyone approaching that crossing it would not be easy or unnoticed. Qin Shi Huang died in 210 BCE, just 11 years after unifying China. He was 50 years old. His death came suddenly while he was traveling. His empire, despite its impressive walls and roads and laws, began to fall apart almost immediately after he was gone. The Qin Dynasty, which had planned to last 10,000 generations, lasted only 15 years. After the fall of Qin, a new dynasty rose, the Han. The Han Dynasty would last over 400 years and become one of the greatest dynasties in Chinese history. The Han emperors looked at the wall their predecessors had built and decided it was useful. They also decided it was not quite long enough and not quite strong enough, and began extending it westward into Central Asia. Under the Han Emperor Wu, the wall was pushed deep into the Gobi Desert to protect the Silk Road trade routes. This western extension was not made of stone. It was made of earth and compressed vegetation, built across some of the harshest terrain on the planet. Workers in this section faced scorpions, sandstorms, extreme cold at night, and extreme heat during the day. The Han also improved the garrison system along the wall. Watchtowers were made more numerous. Supply depots were established. Soldiers were rotated in and out more regularly to keep them from deserting out of boredom or despair. Documents recovered from Han frontier posts show soldiers riding home to ask for warm clothes and better food. Some things do not change across 2,000 years. The Han Dynasty eventually declined, as dynasties do. After the Han came centuries of fragmentation, the Three Kingdoms period, the Jin Dynasty, the Northern and Southern dynasties. During these centuries of division, the wall was maintained poorly, if at all. Sections crumbled, watchtowers collapsed, weeds grew through the cracks. The wall was slowly returning to the earth it came from. China was reunified under the Sui dynasty in 589 CE, and once again, the emperors looked north with concern. The Sui Emperor Yangdi ordered wall repairs and expansions. More than 1 million workers were conscripted for the project. The scale of the effort was staggering, even by the standards of ancient engineering. Yangdi was known for large projects. He was not known for moderation. The Sui dynasty, like the Qin before it, burned very brightly and then burned out. Yangdi's enormous projects, including the Grand Canal as well as the wall, taxed the population beyond endurance. Rebellions broke out across the empire. Yangdi was assassinated by his own officials in 618 CE. The Sui lasted only 29 years. Large projects have a way of exhausting the people building them. After the Sui came the Tang Dynasty, one of the most celebrated in all of Chinese history. The Tang were cosmopolitan, confident, and not particularly worried about the wall. They preferred diplomacy and military campaigns over passive defense. Tang emperors often made alliances with northern tribes rather than building barriers against them. The wall was largely ignored during this period. There is a poem from the Tang Dynasty that asks, roughly, "What use is the wall?" Heroes have always died defending it, but the frontier is never truly at peace. It is a melancholy poem. It was written by a man named Wang Changling, who had probably seen the wall and found it, as many visitors do, both impressive and deeply sad. After the Tang came the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period, a name that tells you most of what you need to know about how fragmented things became. Then came the Song dynasty in 960 CE. The Song were sophisticated and wealthy, with advanced technology and beautiful art. They were also, unfortunately, not very good at defending their northern borders. Under the Song, the wall provided little protection. The Khitan people founded the Liao dynasty in the north. Then the Jurchen people overthrew the Liao and founded the Jin dynasty. The Song were pushed south and became the Southern Song. The northern plains and whatever remained of the wall there were now in the hands of people who had crossed it. In the 13th century, something even larger was approaching from the north. Genghis Khan had united the Mongol tribes into a fearsome military force. The Mongols were the most effective cavalry army the world had ever seen. Walls did not stop them. They went around walls, or through gates, or over sections that had crumbled. Walls meant little to the Mongols. Genghis Khan reportedly said something to the effect that the strength of walls depends on the courage of those who defend them. Whether or not he actually said this, it was certainly his approach in practice. The Mongols breached Chinese defenses not through superior engineering, but through superior speed, tactics, coordination, and a willingness to lay siege for as long as necessary. By 1279, the Mongols under Kublai Khan had conquered all of China and established the Yuan dynasty. The Great Wall was now inside the Mongol Empire. It served no purpose as a border defense because the Mongols were on both sides. Kublai Khan had his capital at what is now Beijing. He was not interested in maintaining a wall that had been built to keep his own ancestors out. The Yuan dynasty lasted less than a century. By 1368, Chinese rebel forces had driven the Mongols back to the steppe and established the Ming dynasty. The Ming emperors were determined that the Mongols would never return. They were also aware that the old walls, after centuries of neglect, were in poor condition, and so they decided to do something no dynasty had done before: build a completely new wall. The Ming Great Wall is the wall that most people think of when they picture the Great Wall of China. It is the famous wall with gray stone battlements, square watchtowers, and impressive staircases climbing steep ridges. It is the wall that tourists visit. It is the wall that appears in paintings and photographs. It is magnificent, and it took nearly 200 years to build. The Ming Wall construction began in earnest in the late 1300s under the Hongwu Emperor and continued through the reign of the Wanli Emperor in the early 1600s. Different emperors had different levels of interest in the project. Some were enthusiastic builders, others let the work slow. The wall crept forward over generations, section by section, ridge by ridge, stone by stone. The Ming Wall was built primarily from fired brick in its eastern sections near Beijing. This was a major advancement over the old rammed earth technique. Bricks were stronger, more uniform, and could be used on steeper slopes. They could also be made in standardized sizes, which made planning easier. Each brick weighed about 5 kilograms. There were hundreds of millions of them. Bricks for the Ming Wall were often made locally, in kilns near the construction site. Workers dug clay from nearby hillsides, shaped it into molds, dried it, and fired it in wood-burning kilns. The process was slow and labor-intensive. Many bricks were stamped with the name of the military unit or region responsible for their manufacture, an early form of quality control accountability. The Ming Wall at its peak stretched from Shanhaiguan on the coast of the Bohai Sea in the east to Jiayuguan in the Gobi Desert in the west. The eastern end is where the wall meets the sea, a dramatic, beautiful meeting of stone and water that many consider the most scenic spot on the entire wall. It is called the Old Dragon's Head. The western end at Jiayuguan is equally dramatic. There, the wall ends at a large fortified gate complex in the middle of the desert. Beyond the gate is open, empty wilderness, the Gobi Desert stretching to the horizon. The gate was known as the Mouth of China, or more poetically, as the last frontier of civilization. Beyond it, the known world ended. The watchtowers of the Ming Wall were placed every 200 to 300 meters along the wall's length. Each tower was large enough to house a small garrison of soldiers and store weapons, ammunition, food, and water. They were self-contained fortresses in miniature. Soldiers could shelter inside during storms or during attacks without abandoning their posts. The crenellations along the top of the wall, those notched parapets you see in all the photographs, served a practical purpose. Soldiers could stand behind the raised sections and shoot arrows or fire muskets through the lower gaps without exposing themselves to return fire. It was a simple design, but it made defending the wall significantly less dangerous than it would otherwise be. The wall was widest at its base and narrower at the top. In many sections, the base was about 6 to 8 meters wide enough for 5 horses to walk side by side. The top was about 4 to 5 meters wide enough for soldiers to march in formation. This shape gave the wall structural stability. It was, in engineering terms, a very sensible design. Drainage was a serious engineering consideration. Rain falling on the top of a wall with nowhere to go would weaken the mortar and cause the structure to crack and eventually collapse. The Ming builders solved this with carved stone drainage channels along the inner edge of the wall's top surface. Water flowed into the channels and out through carved stone gargoyle spouts on the outer face. It is a detail that most visitors never notice. The mortar used in the Ming Wall is one of its most famous features. It was made from a mixture of lime, sand, and, remarkably, sticky rice soup. The rice soup acted as an organic binder, making the mortar extraordinarily strong and flexible. Analysis of the mortar by modern scientists has confirmed that it is, in many ways, superior to modern cement. The Ming builders had discovered something remarkable by accident. Building on steep mountain ridges presented enormous logistical challenges. Stone blocks weighing several hundred kilograms had to be carried up slopes where animals could not go. Workers sometimes formed human chains to pass stones up from hand to hand. In some stories, goats were used to carry bags of lime up the steepest sections. Whether this actually happened is difficult to verify, but historians find it plausible. Along with soldiers and conscripted peasants, the Ming Wall was also built by artisans, skilled craftsmen who specialized in stonework, brickwork, and carpentry. These craftsmen were responsible for the fine details, the carved stone tablets over gateways, the decorative brickwork on towers, the precise fitting of cornerstones. Their work was meant to last, and in many places it has. The wall passed through many different climates as it ran from east to west. In the east, near Beijing, the climate was humid and rainy, with heavy snowfalls in winter. In the central sections, the climate was drier and windier. In the far west, the wall passed through near-desert conditions. Each climate created different challenges for construction and maintenance. The wall near Beijing is the most visited section today. It passes over a series of steep ridges in a region that was, in Ming times, considered the most strategically critical part of the entire frontier. Several major mountain passes cut through these ridges, and the wall was designed to control all of them. The Juyong Pass, the Mutianyu section, and the famous battling section are all in this area. Battling was the first section of the Great Wall to be open to tourists back in 1957. It was restored and reinforced for that purpose. It is the section that appears on Chinese currency, in countless photographs, and in the imagination of almost everyone who has ever thought about the Great Wall. It is also on busy days extremely crowded. Silence is harder to find there than in most places. Mutianyu is another famous section, known for its dense forest coverage and its particularly well-preserved towers. In autumn, the trees around Mutianyu turn red and gold, and the wall running through them looks almost impossibly picturesque. Photographs taken there in October have made it one of the most recognizable landscapes in the entire world. Simeitai is a section further east that has been left in a more rugged, partially unrestored state. Some sections of Simeitai are crumbling, some are steep enough to require ropes to climb. It is the wall as it actually is, rather than the wall as tourism prefers it to be. Visitors who walk there find it humbling and slightly terrifying in equal measure. Jiangkou is perhaps the most dramatic section of all. It runs along an extremely steep ridge with no restoration whatsoever. The wall at Jiangkou is crumbling, overgrown with trees growing directly through the brick, and in some places barely passable. It is extremely popular with photographers precisely because it looks ancient and untamed. Walking it alone in the early morning mist feels reportedly like being in a dream. The Ming Wall was not one wall, it was actually a system of walls. In places, there were multiple parallel walls, with the space between them forming a killing ground for enemies who managed to breach the outer barrier. There were inner walls, outer walls, secondary walls, and subsidiary forts. It was, at its most complete, an entire defensive ecosystem built from stone. Now we come to the most important question, not when the wall was built or how, but who exactly built it. The answer is a great many different kinds of people over a very long period of time. No single group of people built the Great Wall. It was an accumulation, a layering of labor across more than 2,000 years of Chinese history. The largest category of workers was conscripted peasant farmers. During the Qin Han and Ming dynasties, the government had the legal authority to call up able-bodied men from farming communities to serve on public works projects. This was called corvée labor, compulsory unpaid work owed to the state. It was not pleasant. It was not optional. It was simply what happened when the emperor decided something needed building. The duration of corvée service varied by period and by emperor. Sometimes men were called up for a month, sometimes for a year. Sometimes, in especially demanding periods, they might serve for several years at a stretch. Most of these men had never traveled far from their home villages. Being sent to work on a wall in distant mountains must have been deeply disorienting. Letters and records recovered from Han Dynasty watchtower sites give us rare glimpses into the lives of these workers. One document lists the daily food rations for soldiers stationed on the wall: grain, dried vegetables, sometimes a small amount of salt. Another records a request for boots because the ones issued were completely worn through. The wall demanded everything from the bodies of those who built and defended it. Soldiers made up another major category of builders. In the Ming Dynasty, the military was organized under a system called the Weisuo system, in which soldiers and their families were assigned permanently to military colonies along the frontier. These soldier families farmed land near the wall in peacetime and defended or repaired the wall when needed. They were, in effect, hereditary wall keepers. The hereditary military families often lived in small forts and garrison towns built into or alongside the wall. These communities grew over time into permanent settlements. They had markets, temples, schools, and festivals. The wall was not just their workplace, it was their neighborhood. Their children grew up in its shadow, and their grandchildren after them. Convicted criminals were a third major category of wall workers. Chinese dynasties routinely sentenced criminals to hard labor on public projects. Working on the wall was one of the most common sentences for serious offenses. It was dangerous, distant, and extremely unpleasant. For many convicted men, it was essentially a death sentence delivered slowly over the course of several years. There is a famous folk story about a woman named Ming, whose husband was sent to build the Great Wall during the Qin Dynasty and died there. She traveled a great distance to bring him warm clothes, only to discover he had already perished. Her weeping was so bitter and so profound that a section of the wall collapsed from the force of her grief, revealing his bones. It is a sad story. The story of Meng Jiangnu has been told and retold for over 2,000 years. It speaks to a truth that statistics cannot capture. The wall was built at enormous human cost. Behind every brick, behind every tamped layer of earth, behind every beacon tower on a freezing ridge, there was a person who had been taken from their home and put to work in terrible conditions. The wall was great. The cost was greater. In the Ming Dynasty, the administration of the wall project became highly organized. The wall was divided into sections, each under the command of a military officer. These officers were responsible for the construction, repair, and defense of their section. They reported to higher officials, who reported to commanders, who reported ultimately to the emperor. It was a vast bureaucratic chain. One of the most important figures in the history of the Ming Wall was a general named Qi Jiguang. He served in the 1560s and 1570s and was responsible for dramatically improving the wall's defensive capabilities in the strategically vital Jizhou section, north of Beijing. He introduced new designs for watchtowers, new weapon systems, and new training methods for the garrison troops. Guang's watchtowers were notably larger and more functional than previous designs. Each tower had 2 stories, the lower story for storage and shelter, the upper story for observation and defense. They had proper ventilation, water storage, and could hold enough supplies to sustain a garrison for a month during a siege. They were, in short, excellent towers. Guang was an excellent general. The financing of the wall was an enormous challenge for the Ming government. Bricks, stone, lime, rice, iron tools, timber for scaffolding, salaries for officers, food for workers. The costs were staggering. The wall consumed a substantial fraction of the Ming Empire's tax revenue in its most active construction periods. Some historians argue it contributed to the eventual financial strain that weakened the dynasty. Transportation was among the most difficult logistical problems. Construction materials had to be moved to sites that were sometimes days of walking from the nearest road or river. The Ming built supply roads alongside the wall wherever possible. Donkeys and mules carried loads up mountain paths. In some areas, workers built temporary rope bridges over ravines. In others, they simply carried everything on their backs. The foremen and supervisors who managed wall construction were often military officers, but they worked alongside civilian contractors and engineers. In the Ming Dynasty, there was a growing corps of technical officials, men who had studied military engineering and were responsible for surveying routes, calculating materials, and managing labor forces. They were, in modern terms, project managers, and their job was never easy. Women rarely appear in official records of wall construction, but they were almost certainly present in indirect roles. The families of soldier colonists who lived near the wall would have included women who managed households, raised children, and supported the agricultural work that fed the garrisons. In garrison towns, women ran shops and markets. The wall community was a full community, not just a military one. Children who grew up near the wall absorbed its presence from their earliest years. Boys in military families were often expected to begin training for wall service as teenagers. By the time they were adults, many had never known a life that did not involve the wall in some way. For generations of Chinese frontier families, the wall was simply a fact of existence, like the mountains it was built on. Ethnic minorities within the empire also contributed to wall building. The Ming Empire included many non-Han Chinese peoples, and some were conscripted for wall labor, just as Han peasants were. In some border regions, local ethnic groups were incorporated into the wall garrison system, defending sections of wall that ran through their own ancestral territories. The wall was, in this sense, a multi-ethnic project. There is also evidence that some workers on the Ming Wall were paid. Not all wall labor was forced. Skilled craftsmen, stonemasons, bricklayers, carpenters received wages for their work. In some periods, the Ming government also paid day laborers from nearby villages who chose to come and work for payment rather than being conscripted. Whether this made the work more or less miserable is hard to say. The total number of people who worked on the Great Wall across all dynasties is impossible to calculate precisely. Estimates range from several 100,000 to several million at various peak periods. Over the full 2,000-year span of wall building, the cumulative total of person days of labor is almost unimaginable. Some scholars have called it the largest construction project in human history. It may well be. The mortality rate among wall workers was high, particularly during the Qin Dynasty. Ancient sources mention workers dying of cold, exhaustion, disease, accidents, and starvation. Later periods had somewhat better conditions as the logistics of supplying and managing the workforce improved, but wall work was always difficult and dangerous, and it was always performed far from home. The legend that human bodies were buried in the wall itself, used as fill material, has been studied seriously by archaeologists. They have found no evidence of this practice. The story likely arose from the undeniable fact that many people did die near or on the wall and were buried in the surrounding earth. The wall does not contain bodies, but it was paid for with many lives. The organization of labor on the Ming Wall was recorded in remarkable detail in official documents that have survived to the present day. These documents specify how many workers were assigned to each section, what their duties were, how much food they received, and what punishments applied if they deserted or failed in their duties. Desertion, incidentally, was common. The punishments for it were severe. Desertion from wall duty was a serious problem throughout the Ming Dynasty. Life on the frontier was hard, pay was often delayed, and many soldiers found conditions far worse than promised. Those who were caught deserting could be beheaded. Those who were not caught sometimes managed to disappear into the countryside and never return to their posts. The wall's defenders were not always eager defenders. Despite desertion and hardship, many soldiers served faithfully for decades. Some carved their names or small poems into stones of the wall, a personal inscription that has survived for centuries. Archaeologists and hikers have found hundreds of these inscriptions, some giving the soldier's name, hometown, and the date they were stationed there. They are small, moving messages from a very distant past. One inscription found on the Juyong Pass section reads, roughly, Soldier Wang, from the province of Shandong, placed here in the 42nd year of the Wanli era. That's around 1614 CE. Soldier Wang has been gone for over 400 years. The stone he carved is still there. It is a small, quiet way of insisting that you were there, that you mattered, that you existed. Brick inscriptions were also used for quality control, not just personal memory. Bricks made for the wall often had kilns marks, dates, and the names of supervising officers stamped into them before firing. If a brick failed, crumbled too quickly, or was found to be improperly made, the responsible officer could be identified and punished. It created a strong incentive for quality workmanship. The quality of the wall varied significantly from section to section and period to period. Some sections were built under attentive, well-funded commanders who used the best materials and the most skilled workers. Other sections were built hurriedly, under pressure, with inadequate resources. The quality differences are still visible today. Some sections stand as firmly as the day they were built. Others have crumbled into rubble. The best preserved sections of the Ming Wall are generally those closest to Beijing, where the imperial court could monitor their condition and where resources were most readily available. The further west you travel, the more the wall degrades. In remote sections of Gansu province, the wall is little more than a low ridge of crumbling earth, barely distinguishable from the landscape around it. The total length of the Ming Wall alone, according to a comprehensive survey conducted between 2007 and 2012, is approximately 851 kilometers. If you include all the supplementary walls, branches, and parallel sections, the total is even longer. And this is just the Ming Wall. Earlier walls from the Qin, Han, and other dynasties add tens of thousands more kilometers to the overall total. The 2012 survey was the first comprehensive scientific measurement of the Ming Wall's total length. It was conducted by China's State Administration of Cultural Heritage and took 5 years to complete. Surveyors used GPS equipment, satellite imagery, and on-the-ground inspection to measure every surviving section, including many that were previously unknown or undocumented. A follow-up survey in 2012, covering all dynasties, measured the total Great Wall system at over 21,000 kilometers, about half the circumference of the Earth. This number surprised many historians. Much of the additional length consisted of poorly known Han and Qin dynasty walls in remote northern regions, many of which were barely distinguishable from the natural landscape. Despite all of this length, the Great Wall was never a perfectly sealed barrier. It had gates, hundreds of gates. These gates were the points at which trade, travel, and diplomacy passed between China and the steppe world. They were essential to commerce. Without them, the Silk Road could not function. The wall was a filter, not a wall in the modern sense. Things could pass through it when the gate was open. The gate at Shanhaiguan, where the wall meets the sea, was one of the most important in the entire system. It controlled the main land route between Manchuria and the North China Plain. It was called the first pass under heaven. For centuries, everything and everyone passing between Northeast Asia and China proper passed through or around this gate. Its importance was immense. Shanhaiguan was also the site of one of the most dramatic events in Chinese history. In 1644, a Ming general named Wu Sangui was defending the gate when Beijing fell to a Chinese rebel force. Wu Sangui, rather than fight on two fronts, made a fateful decision. He opened the gate and let the Manchu armies from the north pass through. This decision ended the Ming Dynasty and began the Qing. The Qing Dynasty was founded by the Manchu people, who had originally come from northeast of the wall. They were, in a sense, the people the wall had been built to keep out. Now they were inside. The Qing emperors did not abandon the wall. They garrisoned it and maintained it. But they also had no need to build more of it. The threat the wall was designed to address now sat on the throne. After the Qing dynasty ended in 1912, the wall entered its most neglected period. The new Republic of China had no use for it as a defensive structure. Local villagers pulled stones from the wall to build their homes and field walls. Sections were deliberately demolished to make way for roads. Wind and rain did the rest. By the mid-20th century, many sections were in serious disrepair. Chairman Mao's Cultural Revolution in the 1960s was particularly damaging to the wall. Cultural relics were seen as symbols of the old feudal China that the revolution sought to destroy. The Great Wall, despite its prominence, was not exempt from this attitude. More stones were removed. Some sections were used as target practice for artillery drills. The damage from this period was significant. Despite everything, much of the wall survived. Its sheer size made complete destruction impossible. Millions of tons of stone and brick spread across thousands of kilometers of mountain terrain simply could not be removed or destroyed by the resources available. The wall was too vast to kill. It endured as it had always endured, through patience and mass. Modern archaeology has taught us a great deal about the Great Wall that written records alone could not reveal. Excavations along the wall's route have uncovered tools, weapons, personal items, food remains, and structural details that illuminate the daily lives of the people who built and defended it. Each excavation adds another small piece to a very large and very old puzzle. Modern archaeology has taught us a great deal about the Great Wall that written records alone could not reveal. Excavations along the wall's route have uncovered tools, weapons, personal items, food remains, and structural details that illuminate the daily lives of the people who built and defended it. Each excavation adds another small piece to a very large and very old puzzle. Food remains found at wall sites include seeds, animal bones, and carbonized grain. From these remains, archaeologists can reconstruct the diet of wall workers and soldiers. Millet and wheat were staples. Pork and mutton bones suggest occasional meat. Peach pits suggest the presence of dried fruit as a ration supplement. The diet was adequate but monotonous. Everything about wall life seems to have been adequate but monotonous. Analysis of the sticky rice mortar used in Ming Dynasty walls has revealed that the amylopectin content of the glutinous rice created an unusually dense and crack-resistant matrix when combined with lime. Modern researchers have tested this mortar and found it superior to many contemporary concrete formulations in terms of resistance to biological growth and water penetration. The Ming builders were ahead of their time. Remote sensing technology, including satellite imagery, drone photography, and LiDAR, has transformed our understanding of the wall's full extent. Researchers using LiDAR have detected wall sections buried under centuries of soil and vegetation that were completely invisible to surface inspection. Entire sections of previously unknown wall have been discovered in this way in recent years. Radiocarbon dating has allowed archaeologists to date organic materials found in or near wall sections with increasing precision. Wood from scaffolding, charcoal from cooking fires, and organic material in mortar have all been dated to help establish when specific sections were built or repaired. The dates sometimes surprise historians, revealing construction or repair activity in periods not recorded in official documents. DNA analysis of skeletal remains found near the wall has provided unexpected insights into the workforce. Studies have found remains from individuals with genetic profiles consistent with populations from distant parts of China, confirming that the conscription system did indeed draw workers from thousands of kilometers away. The wall brought people together in suffering from across a vast empire. The wall also had a profound effect on ecology. For 2,000 years, it served as a physical barrier, not just for people, but for animals, plants, and even soil. Studies have found measurable differences in soil composition, vegetation types, and animal populations on either side of certain wall sections, suggesting the wall-shaped local ecosystems as well as human history. On the south side of the wall, intensive Chinese agriculture transformed the land over centuries. Forests were cleared, soil was worked, and species adapted to human presence. On the north side, the grassland ecology of the steppe was largely preserved. Where the wall runs today, you can sometimes still see this contrast. A green, cultivated south and a wilder, grassier north. The wall has also been studied from a purely structural engineering perspective. Engineers have been fascinated by its ability to survive on extremely steep and geologically unstable terrain. Studies of foundation techniques have found that Ming builders often reinforced foundations with layers of compacted rubble, drainage gravel, and sometimes timber piles to distribute the weight on soft or rocky ground. Thermal imaging studies of wall sections have revealed details about internal construction not visible on the surface. Some sections contain air pockets, voids, or secondary fill materials that alter the wall's thermal signature. These findings help engineers understand which sections are structurally sound and which are at risk of collapse. Important information for conservation planning. The conservation of the Great Wall is an ongoing and deeply complex challenge. In 2006, China passed the Great Wall Protection Regulations, which created legal protections for the wall and established penalties for damaging it. But enforcement across thousands of kilometers of remote terrain is extraordinarily difficult. Damage from tourism, agriculture, and development continues in many areas. Tourism is itself a significant source of damage. Millions of visitors walk the most popular sections every year, and the cumulative wear from foot traffic is substantial. Steps are worn smooth. Parapets are cracked by the weight of people sitting on them. Graffiti, which has been found on the wall since at least the Ming Dynasty, continues to accumulate. The wall survives visitors as it survived invaders, slowly and not without wounds. Local agriculture is another source of damage. Farmers in remote areas sometimes plow right up to the base of wall sections, disturbing foundations. Others use wall materials as field boundaries or to build animal pens. In areas where enforcement is minimal and poverty is real, the wall competes with immediate practical needs. Conservation and daily survival do not always point in the same direction. Development pressure is a third concern. Roads, railways, and buildings have been constructed through wall sections in the 20th century with little concern for preservation. Some sections were simply demolished for construction materials or to clear right-of-way. A significant length of the overall wall has been permanently lost to development in the past 100 years. The Chinese government has invested heavily in restoration of the most visited sections. The battling section has been essentially rebuilt to a high standard of accuracy. Mutianyu has been similarly restored. These restorations are controversial among archaeologists. Some argue they are too perfect, too new-looking, and have obscured the authentic historical character of the wall. Others argue that without restoration, even more would be lost. Some sections designated for tourism have added modern amenities that earlier generations of wall builders would have found baffling. Battling has a cable car that carries visitors to the top of a mountain ridge section. Some sections have installed glass floor walkways. There is a toboggan run near one popular section that allows visitors to slide back down the mountain after walking up. The wall has adapted. UNESCO designated the Great Wall a World Heritage Site in 1987. The listing recognized the wall's outstanding universal value as a cultural monument and a feat of engineering. It also brought international attention and international funding for conservation efforts, but it also brought more visitors, which created more wear, which required more conservation. Heritage designation is not a simple solution to complex problems. Digital documentation projects are now racing to record every section of the wall before further deterioration occurs. 3D laser scanning creates millimeter-precise digital models of wall sections. preserving their exact shape and texture in virtual form even if the physical structure eventually collapses. These digital records will allow future generations to study and potentially reconstruct sections that no longer exist. The Great Wall is not finished being discovered. New sections continue to be found, new records continue to be analyzed, new technologies continue to reveal details about construction and use that were previously unknowable. After 2,000 years of history and more than a century of systematic study, the wall still holds secrets. It is, in this way, like all truly great things, inexhaustible. Perhaps the most famous myth about the Great Wall is that it can be seen from space with the naked eye. This claim appears in the travel books, encyclopedias, and school lessons around the world. It is, unfortunately, not true. The wall is long, but it is not wide enough to be visible from low Earth orbit without optical aid. Several astronauts, including Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei, have confirmed they could not see it. The visible from space claim may have originated in a 1932 issue of Ripley's Believe It or Not, which stated that the wall was the mightiest work of man and the only one that would be visible to the naked eye from the moon. From the moon, nothing man-made is visible to the naked eye. The moon is very far away. Ripley's was not always correct. The myth persists partly because it is emotionally satisfying. The Great Wall is so enormous that it should be visible from space. It feels right. We want it to be true. But feelings and facts are not always the same thing, and the wall, despite everything it is and represents, remains stubbornly invisible from low Earth orbit. It is humbling in a quiet sort of way. Another misconception is that the Great Wall is a single, continuous, unbroken structure. It is not. It has never been. From the very beginning, the wall had gaps, intentional gates, unintentional missing sections, stretches where builders chose not to continue because natural features like cliffs or rivers provided equivalent barriers. The wall is more of a system than a single object. There are places where the wall simply ends and then continues again several kilometers away with a gap in between. In some areas, the wall builders relied on a river gorge or a steep cliff to do the work of a wall. Why build a wall where geography already provides one? The Ming builders were practical people. They built where they needed to build and skipped where they didn't. The misconception that the wall was always effective as a military barrier is also worth examining. Nomadic armies bypassed, breached, or simply walked through gates of the wall on numerous occasions throughout history. The Mongols in the 13th century are the most famous example, but they were far from the only one. The wall slowed raiders. It did not stop determined invasions. The most militarily significant moment in the wall's history may be its most ironic one. The moment a Chinese general opened its gate voluntarily. When Ku Sangui opened the Shanhaiguan Gate for the Manchu in 1644, he ended the Ming Dynasty not by allowing the wall to be breached, but by choosing to open it. The wall's greatest failure was not structural, it was human. There is a belief in some quarters that the Great Wall was built in one continuous period of history under a single emperor. This is incorrect. The wall, as we know it, represents contributions from the Qin, Han, Northern Qi, Sui, Jin, and Ming dynasties at minimum, plus smaller contributions from various other periods. It is an accumulation of 2,000 years, not a single project. There is also a widespread belief that the wall was entirely original, that nothing like it had existed before the Qin. But walls had been built along the northern frontier for centuries before Qin Shi Huang. The Qin project connected and extended existing walls. It was more unification than creation, in the same way that Qin Shi Huang himself unified existing kingdoms rather than creating something from nothing. The name Great Wall of China is actually a Western invention. In Chinese, the wall is called Mo Li Chang Cheng, Wan Li Chang Cheng, which translates as 10,000 li long wall, 10,000 li being roughly 5,000 kilometers, an evocative expression of unimaginable length rather than a precise measurement. The concept of greatness in the Western sense was added by European visitors. Early European accounts of the wall date from the 16th and 17th centuries, when Jesuit missionaries and Portuguese traders began traveling in China. They described the wall with astonishment. Some called it the eighth wonder of the world. Their accounts spread the idea of the Great Wall to European readers who had no concept of its scale and could barely believe what they were being told. Lord Macartney, who led a British diplomatic mission to China in 1793, wrote a detailed account of seeing the wall. He noted that it was both grander and more ruinous than he had expected. Parts of it were magnificent, parts of it were crumbling. He found this combination, grandeur and decay together, strangely moving. Many visitors since have reported exactly the same feeling. The idea that the wall was built by slaves is a simplification that does not quite capture the reality. Slavery existed in China during certain periods, but the wall was primarily built by conscripted free men, peasants, soldiers, and criminals. The distinction matters morally, even if practically the difference between conscripted labor and slavery, when performed under brutal conditions far from home, may have felt small. The wall has inspired numerous literary and artistic works across the centuries. Chinese poets wrote about it with ambivalence, awe at its scale, sorrow at its cost in human life. The poem by Wang Changling, mentioned earlier, is one of many in the Tang and Song traditions that use the wall as a symbol of sacrifice, distance, and the longing for home. Franz Kafka wrote a short story called The Great Wall of China in 1917, though it was published posthumously. In the story, the wall is built in disconnected sections, and no single person can comprehend its totality. The narrator muses on the impossibility of understanding an object so vast that no individual mind can hold it entire. It is, characteristically for Kafka, both strange and exactly right. The wall has appeared in films, novels, video games, and songs in almost every country in the world. It has been used as a setting for fantasy battles, as a metaphor for isolation, and as a symbol of both human achievement and human cruelty. Its symbolic range is astonishing. It means different things to different people, which is perhaps the mark of a truly powerful cultural object. In China itself, the wall's symbolic meaning has shifted over time. During the Qing Dynasty, it was a relic of a previous era. In the Republic period, it was sometimes seen as a symbol of backwardness. In the Communist period, it was rehabilitated as a symbol of the Chinese people's strength and determination. Today, it is the most recognizable symbol of China in the world. Its image appears on money, stamps, and logos. Mao Zedong famously declared, "You are not a true man until you have climbed the Great Wall." This quote appears on a plaque at battlements. Whatever its accuracy as a guide to human aspiration, It reflects the wall's deep integration into Chinese national identity in the modern era. It is not just a building, it is a statement about who the Chinese people are and what they are capable of. The wall has also served as a canvas for political protest. In 1989, graffiti appeared on sections near Beijing, expressing support for the Tiananmen Square protesters. Throughout the 20th century, individuals have used the wall's visibility and symbolic power to make statements the government preferred they not make. The wall, which was built to control borders, has sometimes hosted expressions of freedom. There are sections of the wall that were deliberately built as psychological statements rather than practical defenses. Some sections were positioned not because they were militarily optimal, but because they were dramatically visible, running along the highest ridgeline in full view rather than taking an easier route through a valley. The wall was also about making an impression. It was architecture as message. Today, roughly 30% of the Ming Great Wall has disappeared entirely. About 20% is in a good state of preservation. The remaining 50% exists in varying states of damage and decay. These are sobering numbers. The wall is not eternal. It is made of earth and stone and mortar, and all of those things eventually return to the land from which they came. The erosion of the wall is accelerated by climate change. Increased rainfall in some regions is dissolving mortar and softening earthen sections. Freeze-thaw cycles are cracking stonework with increasing frequency. Droughts are causing the land to shift and subside beneath foundations. The wall survived 2,000 years of human neglect. It now faces threats its builders could not have imagined. Conservation organizations both inside and outside China are working to document and protect remaining sections. The Great Wall Society of China conducts regular surveys and advocates for stronger protections. International organizations contribute funding and technical expertise. It is slow, expensive work, and the wall is losing ground faster than conservationists can save it. Local communities near the wall have a complicated relationship with it. In some areas, the wall brings tourist income that supports local economies. In others, the wall's protected status prevents development that local residents need. The tension between conservation and livelihood is real and not easy to resolve. The wall asks a great deal of the people who live near it, as it always has. There are volunteer hiking groups that regularly walk the more remote sections of the wall to document damage, remove litter, and report encroachments to conservation authorities. These hikers are often young Chinese who feel a personal connection to the wall as a national symbol. They carry cameras, notebooks, and GPS devices, and they come back year after year to walk the same crumbling ridgelines. The question of how much to restore and how much to preserve in its natural state of decay is genuinely difficult. A fully restored wall is safe to visit, economically valuable, and clearly legible as a historical monument. A decaying wall is more authentic, more emotionally affecting, and more honest about the passage of time. Both values are real. Neither is wrong. Some of the most powerful photographs of the wall come from sections that are not restored, where trees grow through the battlements, where moss covers the stones, where sections have half collapsed and lean drunkenly toward the valley below. These images capture something the perfectly preserved sections cannot: the full weight of time, the honest cost of 2,000 years. We return now to the central question of this video. Who built the Great Wall? The honest answer is millions of anonymous people, most of whose names we will never know. Peasant farmers from Shandong and Shanxi, soldiers from Henan and Hebei, criminals from across the empire, skilled craftsmen from cities, military colonists with their families, generation after generation, century after century. The emperors commissioned the wall. The generals designed and managed it. But the emperors and generals did not carry a single stone. They did not mix a single bucket of mortar. They did not sleep in the watchtowers or eat dried millet in the wind. The wall was built by the people at the bottom of the hierarchy, which is where the people who build things usually are. The worker who laid the last brick in the last section of the Ming Wall did so sometime around 1600 CE, probably in a remote section of the wall near the Liaodong frontier in what is now Liaoning province. It was almost certainly a man, had no idea he was laying the last brick. He was just doing his job. He probably went home afterward and ate his dinner and went to bed. His name is not recorded. It never would have been. Official records kept track of commanders, not bricklayers. His name might have been Wang or Zhang or Li, common surnames then as now. He might have been 40 years old or 20. He might have been conscripted or hired. Whatever his circumstances, his work is still standing in some places 400 years later. This is perhaps the deepest truth about the Great Wall. It outlasted everyone who built it, everyone who commissioned it, and every political system that justified it. The Qin dynasty is gone. The Han dynasty is gone. The Ming dynasty is gone. The Great Wall, in its weathered, patchy, partially crumbled state, remains. It is, in the end, more durable than the reasons for which it was built. The Xiongnu, the people the wall was originally built against, eventually fragmented and dispersed. Some were absorbed into Chinese society. Others migrated westward and may have contributed to the migrations that eventually threatened Rome. The great historical threat that justified the wall eventually dissolved, like all threats eventually do. The wall remained. There is something deeply satisfying about the way the wall's story ends. Not with a military victory or a political triumph, but with time making the whole question of borders and enemies seem smaller than it once did. The wall that was built to define where China ended and where the outside world began now stands in the middle of a country that includes both sides. In the yellow light of late afternoon, standing on any ridge of the Ming Wall, looking at the stones laid by someone who died 400 years ago, it is impossible not to feel something. Call it history, call it awe, call it the weight of human effort accumulated over centuries. Whatever you call it, it is real, and the wall produces it reliably, even in people who think they are too tired to feel anything. Let us talk for a moment about the wall in winter, because winter is when the wall is most itself. Snow falls on the stone battlements and fills the crenellations. Frost forms on the morning stones. Breath fogs in the cold air. The mountains are silent and white. The wall runs through this silence with absolute indifference to the cold, as it has for centuries. It is magnificent in winter. In spring, wildflowers grow from the cracks in the wall. Swallows nest in the eaves of the watchtowers. The stones that were gray and cold all winter begin to warm in the sun. This annual renewal happens quietly, without announcement, the same way it has happened every spring since the wall was built. The wall does not need seasons to tell it what to do. but it seems to appreciate them. In summer, the wall is a place of tourists and heat and haze. The mountains are fully green. The air smells of pine and distant cooking fires. On busy sections, the wall is rarely quiet. But on the wilder sections, Jiangkou, Simatai, the unmapped stretches of Hebei, summer brings only birdsong and wind. The wall in summer is a living landscape, not just a monument. In autumn, the wall is at its most photographed. The trees around Mutianyu and Jiangkou turn red and gold. Hikers come from all over the world to walk in the colored forest and touch the cold stone. Photographers arrive before dawn to catch the mist. The autumn wall is a cliché, but it is a cliché because it is genuinely very beautiful. Clichés are usually accurate. The wall has its own microclimate. On the ridgelines where it runs, the wind is almost always present. Even on still days in the valley below, the top of the wall catches a breeze. Soldiers who served there must have found this wind either refreshing or maddening, depending on the season. In winter, that wind would have been dangerous. In summer, it might have been the best part of the posting. The acoustics of the wall are unusual. Sound travels strangely along it. A voice from one watchtower can carry much further along the wall's surface than you might expect. Footsteps echo. Wind howls through arrow slits at night with no other sounds present. These acoustics combine with darkness to create an atmosphere that many visitors describe as eerie, solemn, and slightly haunted. There are ghost stories associated with the wall, as there are with most ancient places. Soldiers whose bodies were lost in the wall are said to roam certain sections. A weeping woman, an echo of the Ming Jiangnu legend, is said to appear on nights of heavy mist. These stories are not official history, but they are part of the wall's living culture, passed down by the communities near it. Let us slow down even further now. We have been covering centuries quickly, jumping from dynasty to dynasty, and it is worth remembering that all of this history was lived at the pace of a single day. One day of work, one meal of millet, one night of cold, multiplied by millions of workers across thousands of years. The wall accumulates not from drama, but from the steady repetition of ordinary days. The ordinary days are what most history books leave out, the days when nothing happened. The days when a soldier stood at his post and watched the northern horizon and saw nothing but grass and sky. The days when a worker laid bricks in steady rhythm and thought about his family. The days when the rain fell and everyone stopped working and waited. These days are invisible in the record, but they made up most of the time. It is now a good time to breathe. If you have been listening for a while, your breath has probably slowed. Your shoulders may have dropped. The wall is long, the history is long. There is no hurry. There has never been any hurry. The wall took 2,000 years to build. We can take as long as we like to understand it. The sound of wind on the wall is one of the most distinctive sounds in the world. It is not the wind of the open plains or the wind in a forest. It is the wind channeled and shaped by stone, moving through crenellations and arrow slits and the gaps between waterstones. It is a specific architectural wind. Soldiers who lived on the wall for years would have known it as well as they knew their own breathing. We are now more than halfway through our journey. The wall continues ahead of us as it always does. There is always more wall. There is always another ridge, another tower, another crumbling section around the next bend. The wall is not modest. It does not end when you expect it to. It goes on as all truly important things do, just a little further than you thought. A Ming Dynasty soldier stationed at a watchtower in the mountains north of Beijing would have woken before dawn. He would have climbed to the top of his tower and scanned the horizon in the gray pre-light. He would have seen nothing. He would have come back down, eaten his grain porridge, and waited for the day to begin. This happened thousands of times before anything interesting occurred. When something interesting did occur, a dust cloud on the northern horizon, the distant glint of armor, the sound of horses, the procedure was clear. Light the beacon. Count the fires based on the estimated size of the threat. 1 fire for a small raiding party, 2 for a larger force, 3 or 4 for a major invasion. Pass the signal down the line. Wait for orders. Try not to panic. The beacon relay system could transmit a signal from the far frontier to the capital in a surprisingly short time. Tests of the system's documented speed suggest a message could travel roughly 500 kilometers in a single day under good visibility conditions. For a pre-industrial communication technology, this was impressive. The Empire could react to frontier threats faster than might be expected. The logistics of supplying the wall were as complex as its construction. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers needed to be fed, clothed, and armed across thousands of kilometers of difficult terrain. Grain was the primary staple, but grain is heavy and transportation was slow. Special light boats navigated rivers toward the wall. Pack animals carried loads across mountain paths. It was an extraordinary organizational challenge. To reduce the supply burden, the Ming government encouraged soldier colonists to farm land near the wall. These military farms, called Tuntian, grew grain that supplemented the supplies sent from the interior. In theory, the wall garrisons could be partially self-sufficient. In practice, the land near the wall was often too poor, too dry, or too rocky for reliable farming. The theory was better than the reality. Water was a constant concern. Many sections of the wall ran along dry ridgelines where there were no springs or streams nearby. Water had to be carried up from valleys or collected from rain. Cisterns were built into some watchtowers to capture and store rainwater. In drought years, water shortage could threaten the viability of entire garrison sections. The wall was always at the mercy of the weather. The wall's relationship with the Silk Road deserves particular attention. The Han Dynasty extension of the wall into Central Asia was explicitly designed to protect the Silk Road trade routes. Merchants carrying silk westward and spices, glassware, and horses eastward traveled in the shadow of the wall that kept people out also, paradoxically, made it safer for trade to flow through. The famous Jade Gate, Yumengguan, was a Han Dynasty fort and pass on the Silk Road at the western end of the wall system. It marked the boundary between China proper and the western regions. Travelers passing through the Jade Gate were leaving the familiar world behind. Tang Dynasty poems describe passing through it as a moment of profound sadness and brave resolution. The Jiayuguan fort at the wall's western end was an important administrative post where all travelers and merchants entering or leaving China were registered. Officials checked documents, collected customs duties, and recorded the movement of goods. It was, essentially, a border control station, a function it served for centuries. The combination of majestic fortress and bureaucratic customs office is quintessentially Chinese. Beyond Jiayuguan was what Chinese officials sometimes called the Outer Lands. territories that were neither fully under Chinese control nor fully beyond Chinese influence. The wall here was not the end of China, but it was the end of the area where China's administrative systems reliably functioned. Beyond it, you were on your own. This ambiguity was never fully resolved. The wall at Jiayuguan faces west into the Gobi Desert. At sunset, the light turns the desert sand orange and pink, and the mud brick walls of the fort glow with the same light. It is one of the most beautiful scenes in all of China, a place where history and landscape meet in a way that feels almost deliberately composed. It is not deliberately composed. It is simply what happens when ancient things are placed in ancient land. We have now traveled in imagination from one end of the wall to the other, from the old Dragon's Head, where the wall meets the sea in the east, to Jiayuguan, where it meets the desert in the west. We have traveled through 2,000 years of history, across mountains and plains and deserts. We have met, briefly, the millions of people who built this thing, and the wall is still going. There is always more wall. Let us go back once more to the beginning. Before the wall, before the empire, before the dynasties, there was the land. The Loess Plateau of northwestern China, deposited by wind over millions of years, created some of the most fertile soil in the world. This soil made farming possible. Farming made cities possible. Cities made empires possible. Empires made walls necessary. Everything began with the soil. The Yellow River, Huanghe, is the cradle of Chinese civilization. Its waters irrigated the first Chinese farms. Its floods deposited rich silt across the plains. Its banks sheltered the first Chinese cities. And its course, running roughly along the agricultural pastoral boundary, made it a natural dividing line between the farming world to the south and the herding world to the north. The wall eventually would follow a similar line. The tension between farming peoples and herding peoples is one of the oldest and most persistent themes in world history. It appears not just in China, but across Eurasia, Africa, and the Americas. Wherever the two modes of life meet, there is friction over land use, over water rights, over the question of who has the right to control the landscape. China's wall is the most dramatic physical monument to this ancient tension. The Xiongnu Confederation, which the Qin and Han walls were primarily built against, was a sophisticated political entity, not just a wandering band of raiders. At its peak, the Xiongnu Empire stretched from Manchuria in the east to Central Asia in the west. It had a complex social hierarchy, diplomatic relationships with multiple powers, and a military organization that could field hundreds of thousands of cavalry. The Han Dynasty's approach to the Xiongnu was not simply to build a wall and wait. They used the wall as one element of a larger strategy that also included diplomacy, trade, marriage alliances, and occasional military expeditions deep into the steppe. The wall was the passive defense. The cavalry expeditions were the active offense. The marriage alliances were the diplomatic channel. It was a multi-layered strategy. One of the most poignant figures in this diplomatic history was Wang Zhaojun, one of several Chinese court ladies sent to marry Xiongnu chieftains as part of the Heqin, or peace through kinship policy. Wang Zhaojun left China through one of the wall's gates and went to live among the Xiongnu. She is remembered in Chinese history as a symbol of sacrifice made for national peace. Her story has been told for 2,000 years. The Heian policy required the Chinese court to send silk, grain, and other gifts to the Xiongnu each year, in addition to providing brides. This was, from one perspective, tribute, China paying a powerful neighbor not to attack. Chinese officials debated the policy bitterly. Some called it humiliating. Others argued it was pragmatic. The wall was built partly because later emperors wanted an alternative to paying. Emperor Wu of Han, who reigned from 141 to 87 BCE, was the emperor who chose a fence over tribute. He launched a series of massive military campaigns into the steppe, pushing the Xiongnu far north and opening the Silk Road. He also extended the wall westward to protect the new routes. His campaigns were spectacularly successful militarily and nearly bankrupted the empire financially. The military campaigns of Emperor Wu required horses, enormous numbers of horses. Chinese horses were not as good as steppe horses. So Emperor Wu sent diplomatic missions westward to buy or trade for horses from Central Asian kingdoms. The famous heavenly horses of Fergana were particularly prized. An entire military campaign was launched simply to obtain them. The horses were considered worth it. The wall under the Han stretched in the west all the way to the modern border of Xinjiang province. Han garrisons were stationed at oases along the edge of the Tarim Basin, protecting the northern and southern routes of the Silk Road. These frontier posts were lonely, distant, and dangerous. Letters home from Han soldiers stationed at western outposts have survived, and their longing for home is palpable across 2,000 years. The Han Dynasty ended in 220 CE, following decades of internal conflict, peasant rebellions, and the rise of powerful warlords. What followed was the Three Kingdoms period, a time of romantic military adventure that has been celebrated in Chinese literature ever since. The famous novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms, written in the 14th century, is based on this era. The wall played a minor role in these conflicts. After the Three Kingdoms came the Western Jin Dynasty, a period of relative reunification that ended catastrophically in the War of the Eight Princes. The Jin Dynasty then faced simultaneous invasions from multiple northern peoples: Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Di, and Qiang, in a chaotic period known as the 16 Kingdoms. The wall was of little use during this period, as the invaders had already breached it from multiple directions. The northern and southern dynasties period that followed, from roughly 386 to 589 CE, was a time when northern China was ruled by dynasties of non-Chinese origin, particularly the Tuoba Wei dynasty, founded by the Xianbei people. The Tuoba Wei built a wall, not against the steppe, but against the Ruran Confederation further north. The wall was now being built by people whose ancestors had crossed it. The northern Qi dynasty, which ruled from 550 to 577 CE, was one of the most active wall builders of the post-Han period. Emperor Rengshuan of northern Qi reportedly conscripted nearly 2 million workers for wall construction projects. He was known for extravagance in military construction. He was also known for erratic behavior, excessive drinking, and unpredictable cruelty. He had a complicated legacy. The Sui dynasty's wall construction in the late 6th century connected many of the northern Qi walls and extended them. The Sui Emperor Yangdi's first major wall project in 607 CE reportedly involved 1 million workers in just 20 days. A second project in 608 CE involved another 700,000 workers. The speed of construction under these conditions suggests a great deal about the conditions of the workers. The Tang dynasty's confidence in not needing the wall came from its exceptional military strength in the early period. The Tang army, under emperors like Taizong and Xuanzong, was among the best in the world. They defeated the Eastern Turks, the Western Turks, the Tibetans, and numerous other frontier peoples in campaigns that extended Chinese influence far beyond any wall. The wall seemed redundant when you could simply beat everyone. The Tang defeat at the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, where Tang forces were crushed by an Arab-led coalition in Central Asia, marked the beginning of the end of Tang military dominance. After Talas, the Tang began to lose control of the frontier. The subsequent Lushan rebellion nearly destroyed the dynasty entirely. By the late Tang, the idea of building new walls was becoming more appealing. The Song dynasty, which followed the Tang and its successors, faced a fundamental strategic problem. They had lost control of the northern plains. The Jurchen Jin dynasty controlled the Yellow River Valley. The Song were pushed south and never recovered their northern territories. They could not build a wall across land they did not control. Their walls were different. Inner defenses, city walls, river fortifications. The Jin dynasty, not to be confused with the earlier Jin dynasty, was a Jurchen state that controlled northern China from 1115 to 1234 CE. They built their own frontier walls, called the Jinjie Hao, boundary trenches in the far north against the Mongols. These walls were not stone, but earthen embankments with accompanying ditches. They did not stop the Mongols. Nothing did. The Mongol conquest of China was the single greatest military catastrophe in the wall's history as a defensive system. Genghis Khan and his successors did not simply breach the wall, they rendered it irrelevant. Their campaign of total conquest left no frontier to defend, no border to protect. For 80 years under the Yuan dynasty, the wall sat inside a single empire with no function to perform. The Ming restoration of the wall after 1368 was driven by trauma. The Mongols had ruled China for nearly a century. The Ming founders were determined that this would never happen again. The wall would be rebuilt, made stronger, made more continuous. The northern steppe would be sealed off as completely as stone and mortar, and human effort could seal it. This determination was sincere and deep, and it would drive 200 years of the most intensive wall construction the world had ever seen. The Hongwu Emperor gave his sons territories just inside the northern frontier to serve as military governors and first-line defenders. These princes commanded real armies, patrolled frontier roads, and maintained the wall sections in their territories. They were warriors as much as administrators. The system was designed to keep military power close to the frontier where it was needed, rather than concentrated in a distant capital, slow to respond to any crisis. When the Yongle Emperor moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing in 1421, he placed the imperial court itself within striking distance of the northern frontier. It was a deliberate statement of confidence. We are not afraid of the steppe. We will rule from the edge of it. The Great Wall now ran just north of where the emperor lived and worked and slept. The stakes of maintaining it had never been higher. The Tumu Crisis of 1449 was the most humiliating single event in Ming military history. Emperor Zhengtong led a military expedition against the Mongols, was ambushed near a place called Tumu Fortress, and was captured. the Emperor of China, taken prisoner by the Mongols. The imperial court was thrown into shock. A new emperor was quickly installed. Zhengtong was eventually returned, and the wall building after this catastrophe intensified dramatically. After the Tumu crisis, the defense of Beijing and the northern frontier became the central obsession of the Ming military establishment. The wall-building projects that followed were the most intensive of the entire dynasty. Billions of bricks were manufactured. Hundreds of new watchtowers were built. The famous sections near Beijing that tourists visit today, Badaling, Mutianyu, Jinshanling, were built largely in the decades following that humiliating defeat. One of the most important figures in the history of the Ming Wall was a general named Qi Jiguang. He served in the 1560s and 1570s and was responsible for dramatically improving the wall's defensive capabilities in the strategically vital Jizhu section north of Beijing. He introduced new designs for watchtowers, new weapon systems, and new training methods for the garrison troops. He was, by any measure, an exceptional soldier and an exceptional engineer. Qi Jiguang's watchtowers were notably larger and more functional than previous designs. Each tower had 2 stories, the lower for storage and shelter, the upper for observation and defense. They had proper ventilation, water storage, and could hold enough supplies to sustain a garrison for a month during a siege. They were, in short, excellent towers. The sections of wall he rebuilt in the 1570s are the ones that appear in most photographs of the Great Wall today. Qi Jiguang was born in 1528 in Shandong Province into a military family. He rose through the ranks through genuine talent and political skill. He was supported by the powerful minister Zhang Zhuzheng, and when Zhang fell from power in 1582, Qi's career collapsed with him. He was stripped of his commands and died in 1588 in poverty and obscurity. The section of wall he built was still standing. History is frequently unkind to the people who make it. The Ming Wall at its peak stretched from Shanhaiguan on the coast of the Bohai Sea in the east all the way to Jiayuguan in the Gobi Desert in the west. The eastern end is where the wall meets the sea, a dramatic meeting of stone and water called the Old Dragon's Head. The western end is a large fortified gate complex in the middle of the desert known as the Mouth of China, where the known world ended and the wilderness began. The mortar used in the Ming Wall is one of its most remarkable features. It was made from a mixture of lime, sand, and sticky rice soup. The rice acted as an organic binder, making the mortar extraordinarily strong and flexible. Modern scientists have analyzed it and confirmed it is in many ways superior to contemporary cement. The Ming builders discovered something remarkable entirely by accident, mixing food into stone, and the result has lasted 500 years. Bricks for the Ming Wall were made locally in kilns near the construction site. Workers dug clay from nearby hillsides, shaped it into molds, dried it, and fired it in wood-burning kilns. Many bricks were stamped with the name of the military unit responsible for their manufacture, an early form of quality control. If a brick was found to be defective, the responsible officer could be identified and punished. It created a strong incentive to do the work properly. Building on steep mountain ridges presented enormous logistical challenges. Stone blocks weighing several hundred kilograms had to be carried up slopes where animals could not go. Workers sometimes formed human chains to pass stones up from hand to hand. In some accounts, goats were used to carry bags of lime up the steepest sections. Whether this actually happened is difficult to verify, but historians find it entirely plausible. The mountain demanded creativity. The total number of people who worked on the Great Wall across all dynasties is impossible to calculate precisely. Estimates range from several 100,000 to several million at various peak periods. Over the full 2,000-year span of wall building, the cumulative total of person days of labor is almost unimaginable. Some scholars have called it the largest construction project in human history. When you stand on the wall, you feel that this is probably true. The wall near Beijing is the most visited section today. It passes over a series of steep ridges considered the most strategically critical part of the entire frontier. Several major mountain passes cut through these ridges, and the wall was designed to control all of them. The Juyong Pass, the Mutianyu section, and the famous Battling section are all in this area, places where the mountains funnel movement and where the wall consequently had the most work to do. Jiankou is perhaps the most dramatic section of all. It runs along an extremely steep ridge with no restoration whatsoever. The wall at Jiankou is crumbling, overgrown with trees growing directly through the brick, and in some places barely passable. It is extremely popular with photographers precisely because it looks ancient and untamed. Walking it alone in the early morning mist feels reportedly like being inside a dream that has been waiting for you for 500 years. Simtai is a section further east, left in a more rugged, partially unrestored state. Some sections of Simtai are crumbling, some are steep enough to require ropes to climb. It is the wall as it actually is, rather than the wall as tourism prefers it to be. Visitors who walk there find it humbling and slightly terrifying in equal measure. It is one of the few places where the wall still asks something of you before letting you see it. Mutianyu is known for its dense forest coverage and its particularly well-preserved towers. In autumn, the trees around Mutianyu turn red and gold, and the wall running through them looks almost impossibly picturesque. Photographs taken there in October have made it one of the most recognizable landscapes in the entire world. It is a cliché, but it is a cliché because it is genuinely, stubbornly, undeniably beautiful. Some places earn their fame. Today, roughly 30% of the Ming Great Wall has disappeared entirely. About 20% is in a good state of preservation. The remaining 50% exists in varying states of damage and decay. These are sobering numbers. The wall is not eternal. It is made of earth and stone and mortar, and all of those things eventually return to the land. The wall is losing ground. It has been losing ground for centuries. It will continue to lose ground. And yet, much of the wall has survived. Its sheer size made complete destruction impossible. Millions of tons of stone and brick spread across thousands of kilometers of mountain terrain simply could not be removed or destroyed by the resources available to any single period of neglect. The wall was too vast to kill entirely. It endured through patience and mass, as it was built through patience and mass, and as it will continue through patience and mass. There are sections of wall that no living person has walked in years, sections that have not been photographed, sections seen only by the animals that live among their ruins. A fox makes its den at the base of a crumbling tower in Hebei province. Eagles nest in the higher watchtowers. Wildflowers grow from every crack in the mortar. The natural world is slowly, patiently, without any hurry at all, taking the wall back into itself. The Qing Dynasty, which replaced the Ming in 1644, took a fundamentally different approach to the northern frontier. Rather than walling China off from the steppe, they incorporated the steppe into China. They built alliances with Mongolian princes through marriage and religion, particularly through patronage of Tibetan Buddhism. The frontier problem that had driven 2,000 years of wall building was solved not by exclusion, but by inclusion. The wall became, quietly, irrelevant. After the Qing Dynasty ended in 1912, the wall entered its most neglected period. Local villages pulled stones from the wall to build their homes. Sections were demolished for roads. Wind and rain did the rest. During the Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, sections were used for building material and target practice. By the mid-20th century, many sections were in serious disrepair. The wall that had survived Mongols and Manchu was nearly undone by indifference. In 1984, a campaign called Love China, Restore the Great Wall attracted donations from citizens across China and from overseas Chinese communities. It funded restoration work on several important sections and raised public awareness of the wall's deteriorating condition. It was a turning point. The moment the Chinese public began to think of the wall not as an old relic to be ignored or quarried, but as a living heritage to be protected and cherished. UNESCO designated the Great Wall a World Heritage Site in 1987, recognizing its outstanding universal value as a cultural monument and a feat of engineering. The listing brought international attention and conservation funding. It also brought more visitors. More visitors meant more wear. More wear meant more conservation. The loop has no clean exit, only choices about which compromise to accept. The wall continues to navigate this dilemma as it has navigated all dilemmas, slowly and without making it easy. Perhaps the most famous myth about the Great Wall is that it can be seen from space with the naked eye. It cannot. The wall is long, but it is not wide enough to be visible from low Earth orbit without optical aid. Several astronauts, including Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei, have confirmed they could not see it. The myth persists because it is emotionally satisfying. The wall is so enormous that it feels like it should be visible from space. Feelings and facts are not always the same thing. The wall has inspired literature and art in almost every century since it was built. Tang poets wrote about it with melancholy. Franz Kafka wrote a strange and perfect short story about it. Chinese painters returned to it again and again as a subject. Photographers have dedicated entire careers to documenting it. Travelers have walked its length alone. It draws human attention the way mountains draw clouds, not because it demands to be noticed, but because it is simply there and very large and very old. The Great Wall is not one wall. It has never been. It is a system of walls, moats, towers, beacon relays, garrison towns, supply roads, and natural barriers accumulated over 2,000 years by dozens of dynasties with different resources and different ideas about how to defend a frontier. The famous gray stone battlements near Beijing are just the most recent and best preserved layer of something far older, far larger, and far more complicated than any single image can contain. The question of who built the Great Wall has a simple answer and a complicated one. The simple answer is Chinese emperors over 2,000 years using conscripted labor. The complicated answer is millions of ordinary people, farmers, soldiers, criminals, craftsmen, colonists, and their families, whose names were never recorded, whose suffering was enormous, and whose accumulated effort produced one of the most extraordinary objects in human history. Both answers are true. The complicated one is truer. The worker who laid the last brick in the last section of the Ming Wall did so sometime around 1600 CE. He had no idea he was laying the last brick. He was just doing his job. He probably went home afterward and ate his dinner and went to sleep. His name is not recorded. It never would have been. Official records kept track of commanders, not bricklayers. But his work is still standing in some places 400 years later. Stone outlasts the names of the people who placed it. The wall stands as it has always stood, patient, large, indifferent to the politics that created it and the dynasties that crumbled around it. The Qin dynasty is gone. The Han is gone. The Ming is gone. The wall, in its weathered and partially crumbled state, remains. It is more durable than the fear that built it, more lasting than the empires that paid for it, more permanent than the names of almost everyone who worked on it. The wall simply outlasted everything. There is something deeply satisfying about how the wall's story ends, not with a military victory or a political triumph, but with time making the question of borders and enemies seem smaller than it once was. The Xiongnu fragmented and dispersed. The Mongols became neighbors. The Manchu became citizens. The wall that was built to define where China ended now stands in the middle of a country that includes both sides of it. History has a way of outlasting its own anxieties. In the yellow light of late afternoon, standing on any ridge of the Ming Wall, looking at stones laid by someone who died 400 years ago, it is impossible not to feel something. Call it history. Call it awe. Call it the weight of accumulated human effort. Whatever you call it, it is real, and the wall produces it reliably, even in people who arrive tired and distracted and certain that nothing will move them. The wall moves people. It has always moved people. Someone cared about the shape of the crenellations. Someone cared about the spacing of the towers. Someone cared that the drainage channels were carved cleanly. Amid all the conscription and fear and political calculation, someone cared about craft. That care is still visible in the stone 500 years later, speaking across centuries to anyone who looks carefully enough. It says, "We were here. We tried to do this well." That is perhaps the most that can be said of any work. The wall at night, lit by a full moon, is an experience that no photograph fully captures. The stone takes on a bluish silver light. Shadows deepen in the crenellations. The mountains go black and white. The wall runs across this monochrome landscape with almost supernatural clarity, as if it has been sharpened by the moon's attention. Soldiers who stood watch on moonlit nights saw exactly this, and probably found it beautiful, despite everything else about their situation. The wall in fog is a different experience entirely. When low cloud fills the mountain valleys, the wall sometimes appears to float, running along a ridge above the mist, its lower sections hidden, presenting itself as a pure line of stone against a white sky. The mountains appear as islands in a white sea. The wall connects them, island to island, as if it were the only firm ground in a world made entirely of cloud. It is one of the most beautiful things the weather can produce. There is a quality the Great Wall has in abundance, and that is increasingly rare in the modern world. It does not demand your attention. You can stand before it, or walk on it, or look at it from a distance, and it makes no noise. It does not light up or speak or send notifications. It simply exists. In a world of constant demands on attention, the wall's silence is extraordinary. It has been silent for 500 years, and it intends to keep being silent. The stars above the Great Wall, away from city lights, are exceptional on clear nights. Far from the glow of Beijing and the towns of Hebei province, the wall in its remote sections lies under some of the most spectacular night skies in eastern China. Soldiers who stood watch at midnight would have seen the same stars, the same Milky Way arching overhead, the same planets, the same ancient indifferent sky that has been watching over this ridge since long before there was a wall on it. The wall does not need our admiration to continue standing. It does not need our understanding to be meaningful. It will be here when we are gone, as it was here before we arrived. The mountains hold it up, and the earth slowly takes it back, and the whole process continues at its own pace, in its own time, without consulting anyone. The wall is extremely self-sufficient. It has been managing without our attention for most of its existence, and it does so quite well. Rest now with what you have learned tonight. The Yellow River and the Loess Plateau, the farmers and the nomads, the Qin Emperor and his impossible ambition, the 300,000 soldiers and the rammed earth rising across the mountains, the Han Dynasty and the Silk Road, the Ming Dynasty and its gray stone battlements, the millions of workers whose names are gone, the wall that outlasted all of them, the wall that is still standing, the wall that is always standing. The night is quiet. The history is large. The stones are cold and have been cold for centuries and will be cold for centuries more. There is no hurry for them to warm. The sun will come when it comes. Until then, the cold is comfortable. The dark is comfortable. The quiet is comfortable. The wall rests in its position on the ridge as it has rested every night for 500 years, patient and permanent and entirely at peace with being what it is. The fox in its den at the base of the crumbling tower has curled itself into a tight sphere and closed its eyes. The swallows are asleep in the eaves of the watchtowers. The hawk that circled this ridge all afternoon has gone to roost somewhere in the pine trees below. Every living thing on the wall has found its place for the night. The wall holds them all, the fox and the swallows and the hawk and the wild flowers in the cracks, as it has always held whatever lived near it. There is a word in Chinese, chuancheng, which means the transmission of something precious from one generation to the next. The Great Wall is a supreme example of chuancheng, not just because it was built by many generations working on the same project, but because it continues to transmit something to every generation that encounters it. A feeling, a scale, an understanding that cannot be fully put into words, but that enters you when you stand before it and does not entirely leave. The wall is beautiful, not because it was designed to be beautiful. It was designed to be defensive, but because the people who built it brought their full human attention to the task, and full human attention applied to Stone in a mountain landscape over centuries produces beauty. We cannot help it. Beauty is what happens when we pay full attention to something for long enough. The wall received that attention from millions of people, and it shows. It has always shown. Whatever you carry into sleep tonight, whatever worries or questions or unfinished thoughts, the wall will still be there in the morning. The mountains will still be there. The seasons will continue their slow turning. The stones will hold their positions. The mortar will hold its ancient joints. The watchtowers will stand against the wind as they have stood for 500 years. Everything that was there when you closed your eyes will be there when you open them. The wall watched over 10,000 nights just like this one. Cold nights and warm nights, rainy nights and clear nights, nights when soldiers kept watch and nights when no one was watching at all. It watched over the nights of the Ming Dynasty and the nights of the Qing and the nights of the Republic and the nights of the modern era. It is watching over this night too from its ridge in its patient way, the way stone watches, without eyes and without judgment and without end. Everything is holding. The mountains are holding the wall. The mortar is holding the stones. The night is holding the silence. The stars are holding their slow positions in the turning sky. The earth is holding everything, wall and mountains and night and stars and you, in its ancient patient gravity. You are held by the same force that holds the great wall to its ridge. It is a reliable force. It has never failed. It will not fail tonight. The wall asks nothing of you tonight. It required everything of the people who built it, their labor, their years, their health, sometimes their lives. But it requires nothing of you now except perhaps a moment of quiet acknowledgement that it was built, that it stands, that the people who built it were real and tired and far from home and doing their best with what they had. That is enough. That acknowledgement is enough. You can rest now. The Great Wall of China, 2,000 years of stone and earth and mortar and human effort and human fear and human ingenuity. From the sea to the desert, from the first tamped earth of the Qin dynasty to the last fired brick of the Ming, from the 300,000 soldiers of General Meng Tian to the anonymous bricklayer who laid the final stone around 1600 CE and walked home for dinner. All of it, all of them, still here, still here. That is the final thing to know about the Great Wall. After everything, after the Mongols and the Manchu and the cultural revolutions and the tourist footsteps and the centuries of rain, it is still here. Imperfect, crumbling in places, magnificently preserved in others, watched over by foxes and eagles and dedicated conservationists and the occasional solitary hiker. Still here, still on its ridge, still patient, still stone, still the Great Wall. Good night. The wall is standing, the mountains are still, the stars are turning slowly overhead, the fox is sleeping, and the birds are sleeping, and the history is resting, and the stones are holding, and everything is quiet, and everything is well. You have traveled 2,000 years tonight without moving. You have met the wall and the people who built it and the dynasties that crumbled around it. Rest now. The wall will keep watch. It has always kept watch. It will keep watch tonight.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope this video and this story helped you relax and unwind. Now, I wish you sweet dreams, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.